Hello again, and welcome back to another exciting episode. Nimrod de Rosario frequently refers to the cold fire in the Hyperborean novel Mystery of Bellacina Vilca. This term seems paradoxical for logically oriented people. Our world culture has conditioned us to reject ideas that can't be easily expressed or demonstrated with material proof. But some ideas are better expressed allegorically. We see this in mythology, for example. Stories and allegories passed down through generations have historically been effective means of preserving cultural elements. But what happens when certain cultural elements don't conform to modern standards? How many times have we been fed conflicting narratives to a story to manipulate the culture? Even in the past year. Epstein, that's fake news. That's been debunked. Today I'm going to talk about the cold fire and the perversion of the myth of Perseus. What is the cold fire? The cold fire is what exists in the absence of the hot fire. The hot fire is warmth, comfort, animal passion, love. But we have to acknowledge that a hot fire burns out. It exists as long as it has fuel to consume, and then it's extinguished. The hot fire is therefore temporal and untrue. Unlike the cold fire, which is the opposite, eternal truth. The hot fire is material existence. We live as mortals, finite expressions of the Creator, animated in matter, chasing lapses from the pain that is creation itself. We look forward to the weekend, anticipate our next paycheck, and find relief in the thought that one day we'll have worked hard enough to earn our freedom. If I just save enough money from this miserable job, I can quit someday and follow my passions. I hate this job. I hate it. But if I just tough it out for 20 years, someday I can retire in Florida where it's warm. The hot fire is comfort. It is survival. A man will freeze to death if he doesn't stay warm. He builds a fire not only for survival, but for relief from the pain of freezing to death, for the comfort. But that comfort is a deception. A man cannot escape his death with the hot fire, but merely delay it. The hot fire is the warm embrace of the vampire, slowly draining your life. Unlike the hot fire, which must be built, the cold fire never ceases. The hot fire is created, the cold fire is uncreated. The body and soul of man are created, but the spirit, that divine spark which is removed from the origin, is uncreated. Crude, imperfect matter retains no true form, but rather morphs and transforms in repeated cycles. Life matures, then withers and dies. Structures collapse, mountains erode. All of creation is governed by entropy. Not the cold fire. The cold fire is uncreated. When man's body and soul erode, the spirit remains. The spirit is ever present, but shielded by the icy terror of death. Only a hardened man, a warrior who possesses no fear, a man of stone, has the will to remember the true self, the eternal spirit shrouded in death, and recover the cold fire. In the mystery of Bellicina Vilca, on the 8th day is described the ritual of the cold fire, where initiates are first confronted by the hot fire of animal passion before facing the terror of death. All recover the spirit after this, having shed the created self and being left before a reflection of the uncreated self. But not all would return to the world. Those that did were resurrected as men of stone. On the 10th day is described how this idea was preserved in the allegory of Perseus before being strategically perverted to the myth we know today. I will now read from the novel, starting in the 10th day with the original myth. A Hyperborean representation of the origin, as I mentioned above, was Thule, the isotropic center from which the spirit came. Similarly, for the first descendants of the White Atlanteans, the origin was Pontus, who was later personified as a god of the sea and identified with the wave. Surely because from this origin came their ancestors. This Pontus married Gaia, the earth, who gave birth among others to Phorcys and Ceto, prototypical symbols of hybrid beings, half animal, half god. In an esoteric context, this image alludes to the spirit brought by Pontus, or the origin, to the animal man, son of the earth. The brothers Phorcys and Ceto mate in turn, and, together, with a series of hybrid archetypes, give life to 3 women who are already born old. The Graei or Graei, i.e., the Grey Sisters. Naturally, the Graei are none other than the Vryas, the wise warriors in charge of safeguarding the stone plow and the stone of Venus. They are old because they must be wise, and those who ignore the significance of the lithic instruments will later affirm that among the 3 of them they only had 1 eye and 1 tooth. Perseus is the idealization of the captive spirit who attempts the feat of freeing itself from the material prison. Its objective is to discover the secret of death, to obtain the highest wisdom, and to find the original partner. Navutan and Freya inspire Perseus to consult the Vryas, and they, with the Stone of Venus, show him the way to follow. He must go to a sacred forest of ash trees and ask for the help of the gods to successfully confront death. This is what Perseus does, and the encounter with Navutan takes place. The god informs him that the wisdom is in possession of his wife Freya, but getting to her is not an easy task because death stands in the way of mere mortals. To facilitate his journey to Freya, Navutan reveals to Perseus the secret of flight and gives him the sign of the crescent moon, i.e., the symbol of the Hyperborean pontiffs, the wisest bridge builders of the White Atlanteans. According to the White Atlanteans, the Hyperborean pontiffs knew how to build an infinite bridge between the spirit and the origin, Pontus. The rank of Hyperborean pontiff is confirmed by Vides, lord of Katagar, when he gives to those who pass through the gate to the abode of the liberating gods the tunic and helmet. On the forehead of this helmet, the pontiffs affix the sign of the crescent moon. It is a tradition that the pontiffs, thus dressed, had the faculty of becoming culturally invisible, not because of the effect of such clothing, of course, but because of the wisdom that possessing it implies. Navutan teaches Perseus the language of the birds and guides him to the abode of the Vides, who invests him as a Hyperborean pontiff. On his journey to Freya, Perseus will carry in his hand a crane's crop containing 16 stones, on each of which is engraved a rune. When approaching Freya, Navutan advises the hero not to stop to look at her face of death, which would cause his immediate destruction, and concentrate on the mirror, which the goddess of wisdom makes known behind Freya, death. Only in this way will he be able to defeat death. Perseus follows the instructions exactly and, contemplating himself in the mirror behind Freya, manages to comprehend death and is transformed into an immortal man of stone. On his return from death, Perseus uses the language of the birds to comprehend the serpent with the sign of the origin. He then acquires the highest wisdom and finds his original partner. A little further down on the page is described how this myth was perverted. During the cultural fall of the Pelasgians, long before the Golan began their sinister movement toward Europe, the original theme was constellated as a myth. The names were changed, and the meanings were distorted and inverted. In the Argive myth, Perseus, on behalf of the tyrant of Seriphos, to whom he unwisely promised to bring the head of Medusa, goes to the Tartesside because the monster inhabits a forest on the Iberian Peninsula. Such a location is not without reason, since Vides, lord of Katagar, was called by the priests Aides, or Hades, the lord of Tar, i.e., of Tartarus or Hell, whereupon Tarsus, Tartesside, Tartessos, etc., came to designate the infernal places. The Golan also contributed to this placement to a great extent when they were able to observe the sculpture of the goddess Pyrrhina and identified her throughout the ancient world as the Gorgon Medusa. The Argive Perseus is assisted by Hermes and Athena, in whom it is still possible to recognize Navutan and Freya. Navutan, in fact, was called Hermes, Mercury, Wotan, etc. As Hermes, according to the Greeks, he was the son of an Atlantean woman, daughter of Atlas and a god of Zeus, which is not far from the genealogy of the great chief of the White Atlanteans. He was the inventor of an alphabet, of the lyre, and the panpipe, which he traded to Phoebus, the sun, for the caduceus, with which the latter shepherded his flocks. If it is considered that the caduceus is a rod with two coiled serpents, that the sun represents the creator god, and the flock the human animals, it is easy to distinguish in the figure of Hermes that of the one who has understood by means of a language the symbol of the serpent with which the creator god shepherds his servants. And Freya, for her part, was known as Athena, Minerva, Aphrodite, Freya, etc. Of her, the Greeks said that she was born already armed. She was therefore goddess of war, of wisdom, and of love. From his journey back to the Tartesside, the Argive Perseus begins to behave as a clear exponent of the cultural pact. He does not consult the Vryas, but steals their common eye. They send him to the Aslos, home of the Asliids, i.e., to a sacred forest where he meets the Meliae nymphs, who are none other than personifications of ash trees. The nymphs provide him with a crane skin bag where he will place the head of Medusa, and sandals that will allow him to fly. Hades lends him the helmet of invisibility, and Hermes gives him a crescent-shaped sickle to cut off the head of the monster. But what most reveals this forgery engendered by the priests of the cultural pact is the precaution of the Argive Perseus, who fears becoming a man of stone. For in the Aegean myth it is not a subsequent wisdom, but Medusa's own gaze that turns man to stone. The wisdom, goddess of, on the contrary, is not behind death, but outside, next to Perseus, definitively independent and unreachable for him. She does not allow him to be reflected in her naked truth. She limits herself to placing an objective mirror where the hero will behold death without being caught by it. This is all the help that Athena gives him. Seeing the Gorgon from the mirror, Perseus will drive the sickle into Medusa's neck and kill death, without this feat allowing him to attain immortality. The mirror of Athena is his protective shield. The head of Medusa, obtained in the useless feat of the Argive Perseus, is mounted by the goddess in the center of the shield, clearly implying that in this age, after the triumph of the cultural pact, wisdom is shielded by death, with no possibility for mortals to reach it. Of course, this is only a threat of the priests of the cultural pact to discourage the search for the liberation of the spirit. Finally, as the Argive Perseus neither attained immortality nor wisdom, he will not be able to comprehend the serpent, and that is why he is forced to kill her too, which he will do when he returns from this feat, when he fights against a dragon and frees Andromeda, with whom he unites and procreates numerous offspring. That is a summary of how the myth of Perseus was perverted in order to control a cultural narrative. That is all I have for you today. Thank you once again for joining me, and stay tuned.